We appreciate everyone attending today. We've got a nice sized audience to talk about how to reinvent productivity gains with Copilot. I am your presenter, Chris Blackburn. I am one of our solutions architects here at Concurrency. It's really been exciting the last, 4 or 5 months really to share all of the awesome capabilities that AI is bringing to organizations. We've had an opportunity to help a lot of organizations really understand and really start to dig into how AI can transform their world in terms of looking at the possibilities of AI. Really, that's that first step on the journey. And there's tons of tools, and we'll look at some of those here shortly. But understanding the landscape of what you're looking to do within AI is really that first step that we at Concurrency are helping our customers. A lot of it really does happen from two different perspectives. IT sometimes looks at technology from one lens, but really how we can take that technology and make the lives of our employees better is really where a lot of that value begins to be surfaced. And so as we look at how organizations and how their employees are looking at what AI can do for them, there's some real common scenarios, from finding info to answers to taking meetings and being able to provide action items with very little ease. It's being creative and really jumpstarting that creative process. One thing that you'll hear me say multiple times within this presentation is AI is here to help you never create a draft again. So being creative from the moment that you started on a project without investing a ton of time researching is invaluable. That leads into being able to look at some additional analytical work, being able to look at potentially tasks that could take minutes and hours across multiple individuals. That is where time savings and AI really will help to take your organization to that next level. And I don't know about you, but I know every day I wake up with new activities and new tasks and new emails, and no 2 days are usually ever the same. So how nice would it be to wake up and actually have a summary of all my emails and know exactly how to start my day a little more effectively than sitting there and scrolling and then trying to make mental notes of how activities are going to go for the day. So planning is another key component from an end user side. But then as we start to look at our IT teams or our admins, how can we leverage technologies to make their jobs quicker, as well as help them to work smarter? So looking at perspectives of AI from the employer important. A really interesting piece of information that came out of Ignite, as Microsoft had pulled almost 300 of their customers that had been using Microsoft 365 Copilot through early access. There's a lot of really interesting information where out of that 297 users, 70% said they were more productive and it improved their quality of their work. 29% said that they were able to execute tasks faster. They were able to get caught up on meetings 4 times faster. They were able to spend less time processing emails. 85% said they were able to never create a draft again. 75% said it helps them save time finding information that they need, as well as 77% said that once they had Copilot, they did not want to give it up. And of those 297 users, they were asked that question. If they were offered a choice between a free lunch and giving up Copilot, what would they choose? An astounding number, over 77% said that they would give up Copilot in exchange for a free lunch. That just tells you how much being able to work more productive and being able to work faster really is the next revolution in the workplace and the next revolution of productivity, and how AI really does sit at the core of that. So taking how productivity gains are improving how organizations work, we then take a look at the two different sides of AI and how AI can really help empower organizations. The first side is really the commodity side. It's almost the over the shelf. It's what you'll find within the Microsoft suite of tools that you can enable, and it'll let you get to work faster because you're able to use AI on some of those tasks. But then the mission centric side, that's where, as an organization, you sit down as business leaders, as IT leaders, and ask, where can we leverage AI to complete jobs faster? What can give us a competitive advantage? Where can accuracy really power a lot of those activities and give us a better ROI? And being able to have those conversations with IT leaders and executives is really what's exciting about AI, because there's real possibilities where all of those can help them realize large savings in how they work, not only financially, but with time, because all of our time is very important. And at the end of the day, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times as well, what's the most important is your data. If I take and I feed a large language model or AI data that is ill processed or is not well structured, or maybe even it's old data, I'm not going to get good results out. So think of that concept of garbage in, garbage out with regards to data. And we want to give the best data that we can to AI and to the language models. And as we kind of look at some scenarios, and this is where really that next step, that action item coming out of knowledge of the art of the possible really comes to play, is what are some scenarios within your organizations that AI can power to help you be more effective, where you see real world issues within your organization and how you approach problems that take a lot of time? Where could a commodity solution like being able to summarize code or email or finding content or looking at logs help to quickly resolve issues that could potentially take hours to do? And then where are those tasks that are important for driving the success of your business, or how you interact with customers is going to be important, such as creating quotes quicker, or where we use concurrency have helped a number of customers, introducing customer service chatbots that are AI generated and helping to save hundreds of hours for customer service teams, be able to produce results much quicker. Is some real world benefits of time and cost that we've seen with customers. Being able for supply chain to where POs are matched, for supply chain optimization, for all the way to healthcare, and being able to provide Q&As, for being able to produce RFQs much quicker. Those are scenarios where, as an organization, you can leverage AI to do those quicker and more effectively. So be thinking of those as we go through this conversation of where in your business could you potentially see some time savings on tasks that are repeated or maybe take a long time to execute within your organization. So as we talk with customers and kind of helping them look at their technology maturity, there's over the years we've seen customers adopt Microsoft 365. So that's typically one step along the maturity curve in looking at how to improve their use of collaborative tools. Same thing happens as well with AI, and we start to look at how we can leverage Microsoft 365 in the confines of our data to be more effective, how we can look at certain tools such as Bing Chat Enterprise, which is now called Microsoft Copilot, not to make things any more confusing, but that capability is actively available for your end users. And the chances are, if your end users know about AI, there's a good chance that they're leveraging a tool today like a Chat GPT, and potentially even using that tool to help jumpstart some of their work, but training those large language models, which from a security perspective is something every organization should have in mind when it comes to their data. And so taking those first steps and educating your end users on how to effectively use tools like the Microsoft Copilot to securely do searches is very important. And then on the flip side, maybe it's taking a look at the data within your organization that you have today and surfacing it through your own instance of a GPT to be able to help your teams work quicker. So those are baby steps that we could be taking now in readiness and rolling out Windows 2011 or Windows 11 23H2, as well as things like Teams Premium to continue to leverage AI in that day-to-day workspace. And then as we're readying our data, as we're preparing for tools like Microsoft Copilot, which we'll talk about towards the end of this presentation of how you can be ready for Copilot, those are steps that you can be taking to where when you're ready for Copilot, you're ready to jump right in, as well as looking at how could you potentially jumpstart your SecOps operations by leveraging a tool like Security Copilot. So those all can be happening concurrently while you're looking at how can I allow my business community to be more innovative? How can I look to be using AI with my business needs and maybe even interacting with my customers? So leveraging tools like GitHub Copilot, AI Builder are real examples that you could be implementing along with that collaboration or that commodity space today as you're looking at how to implement AI in that custom space from an innovation perspective, and then being able to use things like Power Platform and Copilot Studio to integrate plugins or be able to interact with your end users as well. So this, there are pieces of this that can happen in different orders. For the example I gave from a development perspective, you could certainly be looking at implementing some of the more innovative AI solutions while you're also implementing some of the more commodity ones and preparing to move into that Microsoft 365 Copilot space. But ultimately, that end state is how is AI revolutionize not only how your end users work, how your organization operates, but also how can you take AI and interact with your customers as well. So one of those examples I mentioned is that concept of your own GPT. It's leveraging your own data to help surface answers to questions in some of these very common scenarios that we see with our customers. And in being able to surface that data quicker and in some cases connect your data more wholly through things like Microsoft Fabric will allow you to leverage AI for that more personalized digital experience, as well as be able to integrate some of those broader AI scenarios over and above even just leveraging things like GPT and OpenAI, when you can start to look at some of the other Microsoft AI tools and being able to do things like supply chain optimization, smart warehouse, and AI for good, smart products, sustainability, vision, and cycle counting, all projects that we've helped a number of our customers leverage within that Azure space to be more productive and more effective, as well as being able to take some of the more data-specific tasks and optimize things like supply chain operations, as well as being able to predict when there's going to be failures within that manufacturing space. So lots of scenarios where we can leverage AI to help our organizations work smarter and more effectively with less manpower. So keeping in mind the custom and commodity space, let's shift back to those commodity tools. While we're here, why we are looking to reinvent productivity with Copilot. So let's take a few moments to really connect on how Microsoft Copilot works. If you're familiar with the GPTs, all of those really are rooted in the large language models. So those have been trained to look at natural language. So if I'm asking a question, it knows how to take that and provide a response. But how it works differently with Copilot is it leverages your data that's surfaced through the Microsoft Graph to be able to come back and provide you a strong response grounded within the data that lives within your environment. So if we take that a step further and we kind of look at the overall picture or workflow of how Copilot works, as you can see here, that application or how we're able to surface our means of interacting via a user prompt is happening through either the Microsoft 365 apps or is happening by way of, let's say, the Microsoft Edge browser and Copilot via the web. So any questions that are asked, those are fed to the Microsoft Graph. And again, keeping in mind, I want to call out this very important concept here at the bottom that any queries that are done are kept within your tenant. So it's looking at the graph, it's referencing your semantic index, which we'll talk about here in a moment if you're not familiar with that concept of the semantic index. And it's all secured based on the security and permission models that live inside of your tenant today. So from there, based on the grounding and that, the concept of grounding is, can I leverage the language model and ask a question and look at my data to find an answer? Or do I maybe, if I'm asking a question, let's say, compare my sales results to other companies that are of my similar size? There, you're looking at your content grounding as well as some of the public data that's available in the large language models, but those will live inside of the secure language models that Microsoft operates and are housed within OpenAI. So in that case, the grounding never leaves your tenant and it stays within that same Microsoft trust boundary, which is very important as well. And the thing to also keep in mind too, as I'm asking a question, any of the data that I'm asking is never stored or used in that large language model. As a question is asked, as a prompt is generated, the large language model is going to feed its response back to your Microsoft 365 tenant. It's going to securely provide that answer back to my end user that is accessing or asking that question inside of the Microsoft 365 app. So rest assured, your data is secured when and however your end users are asking that, whether it be in Copilot in the future, as that is licensed by your organization, or even as you're leveraging things like the Microsoft Copilot that lives in or was formerly Bing Chat today. All that stays within that same trust boundary of the Microsoft 365 tenant as well as your data space as well. So to talk a little bit about how all this is possible, how we're able to make natural language queries using the large language models effectively and with your own data is by way of the semantic index. So that takes into account, and as it crawls through your data, if you're familiar with SharePoint or any of the other Microsoft products, those are all from them to be able to leverage Microsoft Search. They build an index. So in the case of the semantic index, it's much more powerful and is able to take a look at things like some of your organization terms and be able to generate a dictionary based on those terms. It's able to look at where are common documents that are accessed by your users to be able to provide the most relevant results. It's being able to leverage the large language models by way of the semantic search and the semantic index to understand your intent, to understand how you're asking the question. One thing to think of too is how you phrase your questions are also going to impact how the results and those answers are provided back to you as well. And so the semantic search is also as powerful as your data. And then based off of being able to provide context, it's going to look at providing additional content within your Microsoft 365 environment as you're doing the search, as well as looking at those questions and understanding if someone's asked it before. Maybe then it provides it as a frequently asked question to where it doesn't have to go into as in depth of a result as maybe you're trying to phrase a question to look an answer for. So all that's powered by the semantic index, and looking at how to use Microsoft 365 Copilot in the real world and leveraging this semantic index. This is one example that I have yet to make a couple of adjustments to this, but in most scenarios, you typically aren't going to find that everyone's vacation time is going to be the same and actually resides in a single PDF document. that lives on a SharePoint site. In a lot of cases, there's going to be a connector or a plugin, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. There'll be a number of plugins that are actually connected to your Microsoft 360 environment via, typically the Microsoft Graph, where if I'm asking that question, over here is going to be my HR system. Maybe it's a Workday, but I'm then able to query Workday to provide the answer to this question under the context of the user that's asking. So if I'm using Copilot and I'm John Doe and I have 10 vacation days, then it's going to come back and say 10. If I'm Jane Smith and I have 20, it's going to come back and answer it with 20, because it's doing so using the permissions as that user to look at that data. And this is a great example of how multiple connectors will really power that Copilot experience to give it the most value, because it could then look at maybe an HR system. Maybe I'm asking a question about my computer. Maybe I need to connect to a CMDB in ServiceNow. Maybe I'm asking a question about a piece of file data that lives on a file server. All those are powered by different plugins that connect up to the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience. And then for presenting that data, it's going to either generate a text summary, or in some cases, let's say that your end users are asking for some sort of graphic, it's going to leverage the Dolly API to generate a picture to provide back to my end user. So this is just one scenario how the Copilot world can connect into different sources to really fuel the most productivity by giving your end users access to a plethora of data that lives even outside of the files that might live in your email or your SharePoint sites or your team sites as well. So in going back to the comment of it's performing those searches as the context of the user, we have to look at the foundational principles that Microsoft runs, even on Microsoft 365 in itself. It's looking at security, compliance, and privacy in the permission model of that user. So if I'm an end user and I have access to a team site and I want to perform a search based on contents that's there, I'll get a specific result. However, if I am Joe Smith and I am asking that same question, looking to surface data within a team site I don't have access to, if permission models are set properly, the user is not going to have access to that data. So be thinking of that too in the context of your data, that you'll want to ensure that your permissions are well managed, that they're secured, that you're looking at them not only at the individual level, but also looking at all of your sites within SharePoint, Teams, etc., and where you're storing some of that data. On top of that, it's also leveraging responsible AI. So if I'm asking a question that isn't politically correct, or it doesn't adhere to inclusiveness or fairness, it's not going to answer those questions in the context of how that end user is asking them. So all of these are foundational when it comes to Microsoft's approach to AI. And then as we start to look at that concept of that Copilot experience, this is actually a pretty new infographic that just surfaced in LinkedIn over the last couple of days. As we look at Copilot and where those Copilot experiences live, keep in mind that there's typically 6 core areas that you'll see Copilot really living, from data and AI to modern work within Office 365 and Copilot, which we'll look at some examples here in a moment, to how can I leverage low-code, no-code scenarios or empower my developers using AI, to how can I leverage AI in the core of my operating system or in my searches as well. We'll touch on all of these as we talk through some of those examples of Copilot experiences here for the next few slides. So let's take a look at Copilot in action. So you heard me say this once, and I'll definitely probably say it again. The value of Copilot is never having to create a draft again. It's being able to leverage data that lives in your Microsoft 365 environment and using natural language queries will allow you to really jumpstart that creative process and being able to create a document and not have to sit down and spend hours combing through data or emails or OneNotes, but allowing Copilot to generate that not only in Microsoft Word, but one of the more powerful spaces of creating presentations. And I just used this one earlier, so I'm going to use it again. It was actually really funny in the last couple of weeks. My 12-year-old came down to my office and he saw me in PowerPoint and he sees as much as I'm in these presentations creating them. He's like, Dad, is all you do create PowerPoints? And I'm like, yes, Aaron, that's all I do. So having that capability of being able to jumpstart those presentations just by using some natural language queries and not have to ponder on what's the right template to use and what slides should I pull from. I can use Copilot and natural language queries to jumpstart those, and being able to use the large language models. It'll pull in some illustrations, some graphics, and frame that up very quickly to where I can add my own personal touch to it. From there, being able to get smart meeting summaries. This is a technology that you can leverage right now in Teams Premium. It is an add-on license, but the value that it adds to your information workers that schedule a lot of meetings or host a lot of meetings, your project managers, these are some examples even in concurrency that we've used today to really recognize some time savings. Or in the scenarios where, if you're like me, you're double booked for meetings and you don't have the time to actually go and look through a transcript or watch a recording, to have the intelligent meeting recap to see who spoke at what point in time, to look at some of those key notes, as well as to see some of those tasks, is a huge time saver. And it really does help jumpstart your ability to get into a conversation with some of your teammates that perhaps were a part of those meetings that you were unable to attend a lot quicker. So, and it's not just the only feature that comes within Teams Premium. There's a lot of really cool features. If you're a very frequent meeting hoster, or if your company has town halls, there's a lot of really nice benefits that the Teams Premium can provide as well as being able to leverage not only in front of your computer the Copilot experience and AI, but also on the go, to where using that Microsoft 365 app that's enabled with Copilot, I can then use voice to text and natural language to help not only create responses to things like emails, but potentially even draft documents as well while you're on the go as your road warriors, not in front of a keyboard or a mouse. And then to really circle out the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience when it comes to productivity, integrating with different platforms via plugins, which there's over thousands of them even available today, and the ability to develop your own, are where we'll start to see Copilot really take some legs and run in 2024, I believe, because then I can integrate with platforms such as my travel platform. And for example, like a Concur, and let's say I have a colleague that, we're taking a trip to Boston. I wanted to understand their itinerary and maybe understand what hotel they're staying in. And they sent me an email, but I'm busy in presentations all day. And I wanted to ask Copilot to book a similar itinerary, a similar hotel. All that is I can do through natural language queries, just by way of the Copilot experience, but also with that integration to some of those third-party tools. And so this is usually where I've had customers ask, so what's the cost of those integrations? And I have to say that it really is probably going to vary based on those providers. The hopes are with third-party platform SaaS providers understanding that you are paying for Copilot and that they are providing you a service at a cost, that hopefully that'll be free, but that is something that as we start to dig into that concept of scenarios where Copilot can help to save you time, where if there is a scenario that your organization is spending a lot of time in a certain tool or a platform, we can either look to see if there is a plugin that will help to speed up that process, or maybe even an opportunity to develop a Copilot of your own. So we talked through Microsoft 365 Copilot for productivity within that space. Let's talk about how we can introduce Copilot even today at the desktop level. And the first place that I highly recommend, if there's one thing you do as an output of this conversation, is to consider the security posture of your organization when it comes to AI, and what tools your users potentially may be using, like a chat GPT, to ask questions or feed a large language models. Try to put a stop to that as quickly as possible and shift over to using now what is Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Copilot, when formerly known as Bing Chat, as that go-to source of providing their enabling your users to leverage those large language models to search and empower their day-to-day tasks. That way you have that peace of mind of knowing that users aren't going to be feeding confidential information about your organization, or potentially even telling a chat GPT to take a document and create a presentation like we saw with Copilot, preventing that from happening and taking users down that responsible AI journey today with Bing Chat Enterprise. Highly recommend that happening as that very first step that you take. Second of all, looking at Windows in the versioning of the Windows that you're running as an organization with 23H2 now being commercially available, there's a lot of tools that are inside of the Windows 11 experience that are AI powered, that, now that Microsoft is releasing Copilot, or what was formerly Cortana, into the operating system, that's now an experience that you're going to see in all, or be able to experience and expose all of your users to, in both Windows 10 and Windows 11. The only caveat I want to call it is, if you do have international users in the EU, the Digital Markets Act is something that, from a compliance perspective, Microsoft has worked to ensure that EU compatibility, and they are looking to, and they have actually introduced an update that I think is in testing right now in some of the early release rings. They're looking to have that rolled out to devices by the end of the first quarter of 2024. So that will allow devices and users that are in the EU to readily be able to install these newer versions of Windows 10 and 11 and those builds on their devices, and ensure that they are compatible by EU standards. And over and above that, looking at some of the AI enhancements, there's a number of them that are built into Windows 11, along with some of the narrator experiences, to where I can use voice access to communicate with AI. Imagine being able to interact with Copilot from a conversation perspective, just using voice instead of text. That's some nice enhancements that are in 23H2, along with some improved experiences in the File Explorer, the Windows Backup. I've even seen things like enhancements to OneDrive when it comes to things like photos, enhancements to AI, Paint, the built-in Windows, or built-in Outlook for Windows experience that will allow you to send emails that sound like yourself by leveraging AI to look at your sent emails and then craft a response that sounds like you, is something that is in that Windows 11 experiences, to simple things like tabbed interfaces in Notepad and autosave, where if you accidentally click it, it'll bring it right back up when it's reopened, to AI within the snipping tool. All those are enhancements at the desktop level that AI and Copilot have brought today and are available even right now. Talking about technologies that we can introduce within organization to help empower some of our users, our SecOps teams are probably some of the most important ones that live in an organization these days. So why not give them an experience that will allow them to not only respond to incidents quicker, but also take a look at their security posture and be able to position that in a quicker and easier way. In cases where you're using, or we have customers using Defender for Endpoint, and that already is feeding threat and vulnerability management information to the security graph. So why not look at that information, that telemetry, and being able to feed that into machine learning, into AI, to where it can leverage security reporting, it can look at real threats, CVEs, and be able to provide an experience that allows security teams to not have to hunt through security tools, but use natural language response to get feedback on specific events, to be able to take a look at the data that's provided and also have it look at any exploits, as well as be able to generate real graphics around the potential flow or a flow of a risk within your security posture. All that from a threat hunting perspective will empower your SecOps teams to potentially what could have been days in hunting down threats take in just a matter of minutes. So that I'm really excited about coming. It's right now still in private preview. So, make sure from a posture perspective, if you are leveraging Defender for Endpoint and looking at leveraging or potentially leveraging Sentinel as a SIEM, those are going to put you in the best position to really leverage that security Copilot capability when it's released. The other part of our end user community are our citizen developers. We have a lot of organizations that have empowered their end users to really become developers through that concept of no code. And the exciting thing is that era is here. By allowing that democratization of app development, by putting tools like Power Platform in our developers' hands, it allows our employees that don't have a technical background to create custom apps. It allows them to do that quickly without having to hire high-cost resources. So that brings down the overall cost of building those apps. It allows you to leverage that Microsoft extensibility and the integration with tools like the M365 platform and other platforms that we saw on that Copilot wheel. By having that extensibility and that connection, your developers can build tools for their teams, their departments with ease. And then from a scalability and security perspective, understanding that Microsoft is going to adhere to that same framework of security, compliance, and privacy and responsible AI, all that really sit at the core of bringing that no coding era to our end users just by using natural language search. And keep in mind that Microsoft's been on this AI journey. It's been probably 25 years. When Bill Gates started Microsoft Research, he had that vision of AI. And then as tools have evolved, as Microsoft purchased Nuance, which was part of Naturally Speaking, to be able to enhance that natural language response by the introduction of OpenAI and the GPTs. And the tools that exist within the Power Platform really have come to a point now where our non-skilled or non-developer users can really build out tools that will drive change and time saving in their business by leveraging things like AI and Copilot. And so here's a great example of where, just an end user within a certain team, maybe they spend minutes, maybe they spend hours a week by processing emails, can then leverage Copilot and using natural language search to build out a workflow and to be able to take an email or an invoice and attach it to a document and send it off to someone within our organization for approval very quickly and very effortlessly. And then from our developer community, giving them the tools to not only analyze code, but also be able to improve it or troubleshoot it very easily with natural language search really is what is powered by GitHub Copilot that lives inside of that Visual Studio tool set. So being able to understand what certain code snippets mean, be able to provide or ask for recommendations on how to improve that code, as well as be able to troubleshoot the code as it exists all can be powered by AI to help to improve those workflows for your developers as well. And to take that a step further, to be able to allow your developers to integrate those chat functionalities and to interact with third-party tools, maybe not necessarily a Microsoft 365 plugin, but really a chat plugin that I can integrate into my own custom tools or maybe a custom platform I've developed. These are some examples, and that number of chat plugins is growing where my developer community can really integrate those into the tools that I'm introducing to not only my end users, but potentially even my customers as well. So at the end, a lot of these technologies, they're powered by the Microsoft Graph. It's grounded in your data. It's leveraging your permissions and security, depending on the user that's accessing it. It's not feeding or training the large language models, and it's powered by the semantic index, all of which is enabled when you turn on that Copilot capability within your tenant. And being able to take that capability further by way of leveraging plugins, there's a number of plugin providers and third parties that are able to connect into the Copilot service, such as things like Adobe or Smartsheets. It's then able to return that capability to look at what's that user's intent, what is relevant, and then be able to provide natural language outputs by way of those particular platforms are available by way of that plugin architecture. And you could even develop your own plugins to interact with the Copilot platform as well. And by taking plugins, it allows you to ground Copilot not only within your company's knowledge, but also empowers it by the capabilities of those plugins that can connect into not only the semantic index, but also in through the Microsoft Graph for that external capability as well. And keeping in mind that as Microsoft is working with these third parties and introducing the tools for you to be able to develop your own plugins, that your security, your organization's security and compliance boundaries adheres to Microsoft's responsible AI standards as well. So all that said, one of the first questions that customers ask over and above, what can Copilot do, is how can I be ready for Copilot? And as we sit down and talk to customers, usually, there's 4 key questions that are discussed. It's how can I ensure my tenant is healthy for Copilot? How can I ensure that I'm ready for Copilot? How can I prepare for that tenant readiness council? Because Microsoft has some skin in the game too, because they want to ensure that you're successful in leveraging AI through Copilot. And then finally, and probably one of the most important questions that probably takes the most time from a preparation perspective to leverage for Copilot is how do I prepare my data for Copilot? And so all these are questions that as we sit down with customers and really talk through that concept of an AI adoption cycle, as we sit down and really look at the art of the possible, look at where some of those guardrails are, how can we be disruptive in our market, will then drive conversations of readiness and being able to envision what some of those business use cases are, to be able to sit down and look at some examples that may be custom to their organization or maybe that are commodity in nature, and then really sit down and brainstorm how to leverage AI to be the most effective and to solve some of these business challenges. Building out scenarios is next in both commodity and custom spaces, and then talking about what technologies within the Microsoft space they will need to leverage to conduct a pilot, and what features and policies may potentially need to be implemented, what data may need to be considered. All of those are stepping stones to success, to moving data into the state of where it can be available to not only your end users, but also available to scale that out to where it's meeting your security and your governance patterns as well. And so that said, in terms of the next steps that we highly recommend you to consider and reach out to us by way of the survey afterwards is if your organization is interested in sitting down after you now learned about Copilot and having an envisioning session. So we've broken these down into two 90-minute sessions where we take the conversations today and introduce the art of the possible to your business leaders and your executives. Talk through that optimization assessment that's going to help you understand what the next steps are for readiness, and then think about where some of those high impact scenarios are going to allow your business to really benefit from AI as next steps. And then after a short break, we'll sit down and talk through a plan of readiness of AI within your organization. We'll build out that roadmap and then talk about what next steps are. In some cases, what we've seen with customers, next steps are really resulting in their data and understanding their data readiness. So we have a data discovery session that we usually set up, maybe even a small engagement where we spend some time to help dig into your data and really help you build out what that journey is with regards to how to make sure your data is not only ready for it, but it's also secured and compliant to meet your company standards and potentially even your regulatory standards as well. And with that said, I think this is probably the quickest I've got through this. It happens when you do it like 5 times in a week, right? So that said, I'm going to actually open up Teams. If there's anybody that has questions, I'm more than happy to kind of field those today. I did see there was one regarding licensing and some of the minimal number of users. And yes, just to kind of answer that question, a lot of what goes into some of that cost for the Microsoft 365 Copilot is the fact that it has to generate that semantic index for your organization. And the semantic index probably uses some of the most powerful Azure GPU compute that's available today to create that index that's specific to your organization. In Microsoft, and if you watch Dathan's webinar on the best pieces that come out of Ignite, there's a lot of really cool stuff that Microsoft is doing with regards to their own Azure data centers. And so as they become more effective and more efficient, we're going to be able to see Copilot scaling out past that enterprise space, which is where it's only available today with an EA, but hopefully, very soon branching out to some of the CSP customers as well. The list price for Copilot, you do have to have Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. So if you have just Office 365 E3, taking a look at your real estate when it comes to your security tools, how you're managing Windows, how you're managing your antivirus, maybe potentially through Defender for Endpoint, we found that a lot of customers, once they start to look at E3 and all the other tools, they are spending the same money as potentially a Microsoft 365 E3. And that is really that entry point into that Copilot licensing as well. And yes, some great questions about a link to this presentation as well as to the video. Be sure to fill out that survey that Amy posted in the chat. That'll get you access to where we can provide that information to you. But yes, great questions. Anyone else? Any other questions from the audience? I know we still have 10 minutes that I'm more than happy, or myself and Nathan are happy to ask or answer any questions. If you have some scenarios, if anyone wants to raise your hand, come off chat, we're happy to field some of those questions. I can take a quick second to actually rehydrate. And if anyone has any great custom scenarios, or even where they see some of the commodity scenarios applicable in their business, and definitely post those in the chat. Love to hear for some of those. Oh yes, the cheese wheel. So the interesting story about that infograph is it's actually generated quite a bit of buzz in the social media communities over the last couple of days. So let me post a link to where I most recently found that, and because it really is a great visual of showing how Copilot AI touches everything within that Microsoft space and why you were seeing everything called Copilot, because it really is taking AI and empowering more productive work within each of those spaces as well. It's a great question. Amy, Nathan, any context you'd like to hop on and add to the
There was
conversation?
another question here from Marty about what is absolutely necessary before turning Copilot on.
So at the core, there's you either need Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 to, and then from a minimum number of licenses, that would be 300. And then you would need to have an existing EA in place as of right now to be eligible for that. After the first of the year, there's hopes that if you are a CSP customer, that will be available, but there's no definite time frame around that just yet. So the question that you had, Robert, great one. Will AI be able to access not only the data in intra? You have changed the way, but in intra, you have changed the way we define identification. Can AI access that information? So the the example I like to use is, let's say that you have an access to a team site and a colleague does not. AI and Copilot is going to respect those boundaries when it comes to permission. And so, whilst the semantic index holds access to that information, if I'm performing that natural language search, it will provide you, it could potentially provide 5 different people, 5 different results based on the level of access that those individuals have to that data. So it's going to adhere to your security, which is why looking at where your data is stored, what permissions are in place, and how it's secured is an important first step in preparation to Copilot, along with actually just looking at the data itself. So if you're using SharePoint to archive your data, and that data from a grounding perspective isn't something that you want to present to your end users, it's usually just as easy before you go in and turn that on to disable indexing on that site. So that way any data archives aren't being indexed and can potentially influence the content of those searches as well. So great question, Robert. Hopefully that answered your question. What about security of code using the AI tools in GitHub Copilot? That one is a great question. Nathan, do you have any feedback on that one with regards to some of the developer tools?
Yeah, I've heard that answered before, that the grounding of the code that GitHub is doing centric to your code is grounded within your tenant. So like it's not a situation where that code is being used to, say, train on your private code and then be used for someone else's execution of GitHub Copilot X. It's centric to your code and your tenant walls in a similar way to which, like, if I'm using my M365 Copilot against my emails and my SharePoint content and my like file servers, that content is centric to my tenant as well. So I should understand that that's not something that's being used to train other people's content, especially because, you know, in many cases that IP is the one of the most important sort of crown jewels of the organization.
Great question. Thanks for that context, Nathan. Yes, and then with regards to large numbers of Copilot licensing, I did get word here from a fellow Microsoft account exec that's sitting in the room with me right now that there are volume discounts available. Can't speak to what those are, but definitely ping us and we can certainly talk to your Microsoft AE and help broker those conversations. Marty asked a great question. If you have licensing in place, what would you recommend as the first step before enabling Copilot? I would say before you even have the licensing in place, let's take a look at your data. Let's take a look at what you're doing for your data taxonomy and governance. Let's take a look at what you're doing for labeling. Those are really great places to start. Looking at your data landscape is probably one of the most effective, especially with what's in Microsoft 365, as well as what may potentially be within your data estate. These are where we're having conversations with customers around Fabric and how we can integrate data even outside of Microsoft 365 productivity tools to be able to really enhance the productivity of your end users with your custom data. And that really falls within that custom AI scenario as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that like a lot of the conversations that Chris has been talking about today are falling in two different domains. There's the domain of like the commodity uplift of all of us being able to be more productive together. And then there's all these custom GPTs that we're building or custom AI scenarios that we're engaging in, that these things plug into each other. So like, let's say you're in Copilot and you build this custom solution that's surfacing data from your employee manual or this or that. These plug into each other. We have the ability to sort of ride on the benefits of the work that we're doing between the two domains. So a lot of really great like work of us being able to rise up the tide of all ships in the general productivity space, but then also do mission-driven use cases that have a very high precision level necessary in order for us to roll them out.
Great point. Thanks, Nathan. And with that, we've got 2 minutes left. Definitely wanted to remind you, please fill out that survey that was posted in the chat. Love to get your feedback on this conversation around the commodity AI, as well as get you access to not only the recording, but also the deck that we presented today. And if there's any other questions, definitely feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we definitely wish you a great day and hope to help you with your AI journey here at Currency as well.